Populist politics have been sweeping through many parts of the world, including India, Brazil and Hungary. The election of Donald Trump, regarded by many as an arch-populist, is seen as the most dramatic example of the current rise of populism. But what exactly is it? And is this something we should in South Africa be worried about? Social and political movements use populist discontent, concerns and fears to further their agenda. In South Africa, right-wing groups have been using the fear of farm killings and land expropriation to whip up support locally and internationally. The EFF, with its fiery rhetoric, uses the continued poverty and marginalisation of many black people to gain support. Even the ANC has been accused of being populist for adopting policies that are sometimes seen as anti-markets. And the DA also sometimes use populist fears of foreigners taking away local jobs to garner followers. So do we face a threat like other parts of the world? Tonight we speak to Siya Ebenezer of Political Economy, Southern Africa. He joins us via Skype. In studio with me is the political analyst Sifiso Mahlangu and Gabriel Kruse of the Institute of Race Relations about populism and the danger it poses. Very warm welcome, all three of you. Siya Ebenezer, are we hurtling towards a populist future, or are we in it already?
Yes, I think we're partly in it, and I also think that it's partly inevitable, given the level of inequality in South Africa. It's bound to happen that, the most dominant form of politics is either going to pit an elite that's in control of the masses. And so, yes, I think we're partly in it, and we're headed to more of it in future. But I think it all depends on the kinds of policies that come out of the process as to whether this will hurt the economy or actually do any good in reducing inequality in South Africa.
Okay, Sifiso?
Well, I think politicians are inherently mobilized by reaching crowds. So politicians become populists, and it's in their nature. And it's that relationship that is often very dangerous between the media and politicians. And we often in the media feed off politics, but politicians feed off us a lot. And so we have this relationship that often becomes very cantankerous, and it's sloganeering. You get the EFF in this country saying, well, we're going to march to APSA and close it down because of the CIX report. And the CIX report is because Advocate Paul Hoffman said APSA received funding from the apartheid government before the government of national unity, and the EFF demands is going to close it down. Populist stance, there's a lot of sloganeering.
And also the targeting of journalists.
The targeting of journalists and all that. And what happens in the next few months, the EFF completely abandons that stance, and that's a populist move. You get the likes of AfriForum. Most recently, we had President Cyril Ramaphosa standing up in Parliament responding to Musi Maimane and saying, if my son Andile has an illicit contract with Bosasa, I will take him to the police station myself. And that's populism at its highest. A few days later, he retracts that statement and says, well, actually, Bosasa didn't give Andile money. I didn't see the contract. It was actually money into my campaign. So what did he mean when he said he saw the contract himself? So it's a lot of populism. What he was saying to the opposition benches there is, I'm a righteous leader, possibly unlike the former leader of the ruling party, and I'll take my son to the police station himself. So it could have been that he got home and Andile says, hey, I'm not going to let this country do to me what they did to Duduzane. You're going to go and retract that. But why did he have to go there and become so vocal about something that he possibly knew wasn't true? So it's populism at its highest.
I mean, are you reading it that way as well? Do you see it when it comes to race relations?
Let me offer an alternative. I think there's validity there, but just another way of looking at things. In any democracy, you'd expect politicians, as you said, to sort of try to increase their power base by reaching out to the largest group of people that they can energize to vote for them. So if populism just means that, then it's got no negative bite. The word clearly does have a negative connotation or denotation. So where does that come from? I think a clear way to see where it can come from is in what it's opposed to. The populace opposed to the elite. So anti-elitism.
It's real sort of good versus the bad, isn't it? Sort of simplistically put.
Yeah, so the kinds of elite that get attacked by populists, amongst those that you've mentioned globally, are academics, scientists, engineers, people who come up with statistics, people who do serious surveys. So sort of an archetype global populist move is sort of to deny climate change. I think despite what all the scientists say, you say, who cares what the scientists have to say? We can feel it in our gut. So I think in that more narrow sense, populism is in a very confused space in South Africa. In a way, the EFF has put the elitist hat on themselves. They accuse the DA of putting up a chief whip who doesn't have a post-university degree. That sort of puts the DA in a more populist kind of light, and the EFF as the elitists, and they are full of PhDs. They're very interested in certification of their acumen, and I think that's the kind of thing that populists sometimes push against, and often to their own detriment, because experts, you know, if they're doing their job right, they do know.
Okay, let me just quote this tweet of Donald Trump's in 2017. This was during his inauguration address in January. He said, "For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the costs." So both of you were touching on it there. But Sia, I mean, talking about costs and the economy and, you know, shock horror, it's done pretty well under Donald Trump, even though it was initiated by Barack Obama, the recovery in the economy. When you look at countries that have adopted these policies, they haven't done very well. I mean, Venezuela is the one that really stands out, doesn't it?
Yes,
what are the pros and the cons when it comes to populism here?
So I think populism in itself doesn't necessarily lend itself to sort of the negative connotation that it's taken on in the popular discourse or the media coverage of it. I think if populism represents a sincere view of the majority of the population, as you might have seen in the case of the US with Trump and how he represents a majority of the population and majority of how sort of certain Americans feel, it can actually lead to change. It all really depends on how the state apparatuses are used, as well as how policies are made. So, for example, if populism leads to reckless borrowing from international finance, etc., in order to finance big mega projects like statues or big airports that only serve the interests of part of the economy, that's definitely not a positive, and then that can have detrimental impact both on the economy and socioeconomics generally. But if it does lead to a general sort of emancipation, if you were, of the masses who are seemingly oppressed by the elites, then it can lead to positive outcomes. Yes, there are limited examples of this, but I mean, it's not necessarily the case that all kinds of populist movements will lead to negative economic or political outcomes.
Okay, let's just pause this for a moment because we've got a caller, Shlulani, on the line from Lombardy. Go ahead, Shlulani.
Hi, how are you, Jane?
Good, thank you.
I'm good. I just want to ask your guests there. Anyone can answer this. I just want to check, if you can check, the ANC was losing popularity at some time with more people not satisfied with all the scandals that were attached to the ANC. And then suddenly they adopted the motion to expropriate land without compensation. Do your guests think that was another way of the ANC trying to gain popularity, where they're using the land issue to gain popularity again?
Okay, thanks, Shalani. Sifiso?
Well, I do think certain facets of the ANC are not prepared to bring back the land. Let's be honest, the ANC's had 24 years to expropriate the land, and only less than 5% of it has been expropriated. At this point in time, there are very wobbly nuances about the expropriation of land, particularly without compensation. You get Minister Derek Hanekom, who is a member of the NEC of the ANC, saying land expropriation without compensation is stupidity. But you get others who promote it. And these people are all in the same clique. These are NEC members. So you understand that this notion of a broad church within the ANC is actually killing it, because some don't really believe it, but because it was a Nasrec policy, they've got to speak of it. And so it's going to be very difficult to expropriate this land. And I think populism lends itself to the needs of people. If you see that people are landless, and you want to win a campaign, you simply say, I'll bring back the land. If people need money, you simply secure jobs. But it's more than that. What are you prepared to do? What are the mechanisms within expropriation of land without compensation? And maybe one should
sorry, just because we are running out of time, I just want to ask you about the impact on race relations. I mean, we've seen, if you look at Brexit, you look at the fear, how Hungary has been treating people, the sort of conversations, it's dominated by fear, isn't it, of the other person?
Right. So if you don't have a good reason to do something based on sort of expert analysis and robust debate, then the only reason you're going to have left to do something is that it sort of fits some kind of group identity, whether anyone actually thinks that way or not. So an interesting thing about your caller's question is that I think it's a spot-on question, and the thing to notice is that the ANC's probably lost a little bit of support having proposed expropriation without compensation on a sort of race nationalist basis. And it's not a particularly popular view. ENCA did a study last year where they found most ANC supporters at that time, at the end of 2017, were looking for more business-friendly policies and were opposed to radical economic transformation. The Institute for Race Relations has consistently done polls that finds that black, white, most South African voters are really not into this. But what does that matter? That's a scientific, social experiment. And what does it matter when an economist says it's going to hurt the economy? Economists come from universities and they deal with numbers and they're highfalutin. They don't really speak from the voice of the people. So I think what populism often amounts to is someone speaking very loudly and very aggressively and hoping that bluster will carry the day.
Well, it seems that something that needs to be used where necessary seems to be bubbling to the forefront.
He was almost sounding like Mr. Rupert there, talking about the needs of black and white and looking at South Africa through the study mechanism. I remember one of his statements saying Ority was a mechanism to loot. And one studies, and you take a big university like Yale and you study South Africa, but Yale doesn't know the dynamics and the grassroots levels that South Africans in this country have to deal with. There are experiments, and then there are people.
And let's leave it there because we run out of time. Gentlemen, thank you very much. That was great talking to you.